So the question today is comes from a sync Livia and I had, and we were looking for a new kind of intro. And I was been reflecting on my biases because I've been reflecting on somebody else's biases. My best friend and I had a dispute yesterday, and immediately I'm like, he has all these biases. And I was like, wait, I have all these biases. What are my biases? What am I bringing into this dispute? Where am I responsible for this dispute? We've made up in a beautiful way, just in case anyone's worried about it. But it got me thinking, what are my biases? So that's our question today. What are the biases that you bring when you come to the office, or when you have interactions with people to the office, when you come to Discord, when you have interactions with people, when you're, yeah, what biases do you bring? And I think I'll pass to Nate to kick us off.
Oh man, it's a tough one. I do have a lot of biases, and I don't know if I could, it's something that I wish I had the awareness to say that I know all my biases, but a lot of times it's just, it's some of these like little prejudices that I'm completely unaware of. And only reveal themselves in the context of when I'm actually engaging with somebody in conversation. And so it's kind of a difficult question for me, but I give, it's a tough one. I don't know. It's something that I have to think more about, but I might have to come back to that.
It's like we should say the biases of each other.
I know. Yeah. Maybe you could inform me of my own biases, because I'm not sure, to be honest with you. So let me think on that for a minute, and if anybody else is ready to go, I pass to you.
Well, maybe I'll go, just to sort of be a little vulnerable. We have biases that we're conscious of, but then that whole other thing, like our unconscious bias, that that is a field of study where we can see biases revealed even though people aren't aware of them. So for my conscious biases, I certainly have a bias towards empowering and lifting other women up. Like there's the other way to do this. There's like my positive bias, and some of that is like, I don't know, this feeling of like there's a lot of male entitlement in the world, and I feel that, and I'm just like, oh, we gotta support. Like we need to make a positive bias for women, to sort of compensate for that inequality. So that's a bias that I know I have. It's a bias that I'm going to live with. I might not change that bias too much, although I do recognize it. And then I live in a country, and I have a bias against the culture of the country that I live in. And that's a really weird thing to say, but I live in a foreign country, so I feel a little bit frustrated because I don't connect well in French culture. So I get really frustrated in my interactions. So sometimes I'm just like, oh, it's such a French thing, and it's just like, that's one that I want to correct and check and learn to become more, involved, like deeply integrated into the culture of the country that I'm living in. Those are two that I think, that I recognize, and there's plenty others. And I'll pass to Katie.
Oh, thank you. I was just going to offer a word there that I'll use for myself as well, as tolerance, like a tolerance. When you recognize your biases, that you can maybe not rid yourself of them, but you can look for a tolerance. So I think I have biases in general toward efficiency and logic, meaning that it's very hard for me to accept when people are illogical or inefficient. Like I appreciate speed is not the right word. Like, so in old in a relationship long gone now, the big complaint was that I was what was called the optimizer. which I kind of take to be a compliment. But it wasn't meant as a compliment. Like, I always have to optimize everything. You know, everything has to be, and it has to be done quickly. So the sense of efficiency, like running I might be a good ship captain or something. And so it means I have a bias and a kind of an intolerance toward folks who don't operate that way. I want stories to be told quickly. I want to get to the point. I want my kids to clean up and go to bed like in an orderly fashion. And there we go. She's interrupting me now. So tolerance. I will pass. Okay, I'll help you in a second. Thank you. I'll pass to Mateo. Excuse me.
Thank you, Suga. I believe that my main bias, and I believe it's coming also from my culture, is to be distrustful somehow. So by default, I am like, I cannot trust you, so I need some kind of proof to have, or I will distrust you until you prove me otherwise that I can have some trust regarding you. So I believe that in an extreme that can be problematic sometimes. So everything in extreme is can have some trouble, but I believe that that is my main trait. I believe it comes from culture, my family, and in general how life evolves throughout time. So I am trying to give more trust to people, to society in general, but I believe it can get really troublesome when you start feeling pessimistic regarding everything because you are distrusting almost everything. So yeah, I believe that's my main bias, and I think I am very conscious about it, and I try to overcome it with interacting and experiencing every day a little bit more. So yeah, I'll pass it to Juan.
Thanks, Mateo. Well, I think I am a little bit biased towards cold numbers. Like, I like when numbers are like associated to somehow like some social or cultural aspect or unit. But when I see like numbers or like technology that is not like really into or considering the social part, I think that I criticize those theses because I think that they are not taking into account what I think that is also relevant for those propositions. And I will pass to Santi.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. I resonate a little bit with Katie. I tend to, when I engage with something, I tend to want to do it fast, to want to try to search for the optimum. If I have to cross the street, I don't give a shit about lights. I just watch cars and I go diagonal. And when I have to do something, I have to go get something from the house. I try to think of something else I can do while I'm doing that. And I also have the bias of not trying to relax too much. It's hard for me to just do nothing, and sometimes it's good to do nothing for a while, every once in a while. So those are the ones that I know of. I'm sure I have tons of others. I will pass it to Griff.
Can you repeat the question? I came in a little late. It's about bias?
Yeah, what are your biases?
Oh,
the ones
man,
you know of.
I have so many. I'm biased towards tools and tech, and blockchain can solve everything. Those kinds of biases. I think that there is like a starting bias over a finishing bias. I really like starting things. It's really hard for me to finish things sometimes. And I definitely, I mean, I try to overcome some of these biases, but there's like really easy bias towards like people who are around, you know, like this took me a long time to get over. It's just like hiring the people that are around versus like, you know, making job application, going maybe structurelessness over structure, a bias towards structurelessness. And I'll pass it back to you, Livia, to pass it.
Pass to you, Anna Marie.
Thank you. Yeah, I have so many. Also, in the workplace, I have a really big bias about what I term and see as professionalism. So things like do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, or communicate as quickly as you can, be on time, pay attention. And I find it a real struggle if someone doesn't do that. I find it quite a personal kind of affront. I'm really biased about accents, like both positively and negatively. So foreign accents often, like the US accent, to me, I just assume everyone's really intelligent. They just sound really intelligent to me. And then there's certain like English accents that I have real issues with, like very kind of posh accents. I have like all this stuff comes out about the people behind it. Yeah, I guess positive ones, because I thought that was a nice framing term of positive. I guess a positive bias is that I'll give my time to like anyone that asks for help. If someone needs help and they ask for it, and they're like, I'll just give my time without thinking about it. So, yeah. And what about Septimus? Pass to you.
Thank you, Anna Maria. Yeah, I'm kind of aligned with what Mateo was saying. I'm super distrustful, but it's not like I don't trust people. I just don't trust humans. I don't even, at some point I don't even trust myself, because I don't know. It's weird. It's super weird, because like we humans, on some situations we act one way, and then on the other situations we act another way, especially when there is pressure and that stuff. And then I'm also like, I love you, Tam, but I feel like, for example, like you don't need to empower women, you need to empower people. Because if especially like when we're doing rules on society, we need to make like the same rule. Like I feel like jurisdictionally, the rules should be the same for everyone. Like here in Spain, like we have different rules for men and women, and that's why I'm bringing this up. And it's a bit political, and it's hard for me to think in English, but I feel like we should be all the same. And for example, if there is two kids that have to go, like one kid have a lot of potential to save humanity, and the other kid maybe not, you want to spend your resources on the kid that maybe he can help, because if you spend the resources on the other kid just to make them equal, like inequity at some point might be good. It's hard to explain in a call, and I don't want to extend, so I'll pass it to Nate. Did you have time to think?
Yeah, I don't know how much good it did. I after hearing what you said, I have a lot of cultural and political biases that I think that largely go kind of unaddressed or unaware of most of the time. Especially, I look at the world through an American lens, and honestly, this is one of the first communities that was truly international, and so like being exposed to different cultural practices and different accents and different ways of approaching problems. I have a pretty strong bias like towards I would say the American way of doing things, and so I think that's really important to acknowledge. And so thank you for bringing this question up, because it's not something I spent a lot of time thinking about, although I should and become more aware of. So it's a great conversational piece to start off. I'll pass to who hasn't gone. Is that everybody?
Amy, hi. Do you want to
Sure.
share?
So I think the first one that comes to mind, and the strongest one, it's the anchoring bias. I think the first, either if it's in voting or the first proposal that I see, or numbers shown first time, I think it truly makes me it truly brings me a lot of influence in terms of how I view other projects or things in parallel and compared to that. And I was thinking about even the hatch param votes, because I was really a lot, like I was influenced when I saw the first one that had the most votes, and I was like, that must be really good, without actually going through all of them. I already put the sort of semi-label on it because it has already been voted by a certain number of people. Yeah, I think that's the strongest one. Juan, did you want? Or
Yeah, I did.
okay.
No, who hasn't gone? I think.
I think I'm the last one. I can take it. Well, I share Tam's bias of yeah, I think a very inherent negative bias towards certain archetypes of certain male archetypes, and mostly the entitlement, I think, that Tam shared. I resonate with that. And I think that leads to another bias, that is the authority, like biased against like large figures of authority, or like a positive bias towards people who have been in oppressive, like in oppressed situations. And maybe it's also, like Mateo said, like being Latin American and seeing all of those things more closely. And when it comes to voting now, I was thinking that you said, Mihai, if I have a bias that I can acknowledge from voting practices. I do think that when I can see who is the people who voted, that influences my behavior more than if I don't know who voted and I just see the numbers. Then I don't think the numbers influence me that much, of like, oh, there is this amount of people that voted yes or no. But if I could see who voted yes and who voted no, maybe that does influence me. Cool. Yeah, thanks, Tam, for bringing this question. That's very interesting. I think there's a lot, and like Tam said in the beginning of the call, there's probably some biases that are not so easy to share in a group. So it's just a good reflection to have for ourselves, like maybe what are the biases that we do identify but we don't feel comfortable in sharing, and just how to like pay more attention in them. And the first topic of the agenda is the Celeste proposal approval. So this talking about biases and voting behavior. This proposal was approved with 15 votes. By the time I closed it, there was 13 votes. And we had a brief discussion in the Stewards channel about is it the time to like take another look at our voting process? Is this legitimate? Like there was no questions, there was no neutral or block votes. Is 15 a good number for us to be based on, like in relation to the size of our community? Are we comfortable with this decision? There was a kind of a feeling that people didn't understand so much like everything that Celeste is. So the temperature check I got from the chat, and anyone who read can give your inputs to, is that we'll have the covenant that will have to be built, and this is a very important process that we will need to have a lot of attention involved in it. So I think this will be enough to solve any questions we might have and to create this feeling of security that we are taking like an informed decision. And yeah, that we'll do this process together and have a voting for the covenant, and that will be the most meaningful vote. But then also talking to Tim today, we thought, oh, maybe it is good to always introduce a debate, or not always, but when a topic is somehow sensitive, to introduce a debate and give time for that and make the debate parties that were so great during the Param sessions. Does anyone has anything to add to this point?
I was going to say that my biggest point and issue with this is just to figure out what qualifies a decision to become a vote. For example, Celeste, like what is it about Celeste and the implementation of it that requires a forum vote, and do we have any rules and requirements set around those decisions?
Yeah, that's a good question. We talked a little bit in the governance workshop last week about how to be decision ready. And I think this is a very informal process that has a lot of like relationship and trust involved, and kind of like opening spaces for sense making. So we try to do with the calls here, and hi Durgadas. Yeah, we try to do with the calls and the working groups and the community call to, and the forum, like having spaces where sense making can be that people can put out their opinions, and that if there is like doubt or controversy, or if it's not like a very easy consensus to be made, that we have a vote. And I think this kind of happened with Celeste because we've been talking about this for a long time. So there was an advice process. There was a lot of questions about it. There was like, where are we? But it still felt like maybe people didn't understand fully. And I think this is normal because it's a super new feature that even One Hive is still testing. So I think in this cases, it's a good practice to have a vote when something is going to influence it's going to impact the community a lot. Any other comments, or we can move on? Cool. So as a byproduct of this voting passing would be that we would start working on the covenant. And what is the covenant? Is a manifesto, is an agreement from the whole community that will be used for every time that a proposal is challenged. And if it goes all the way until Celeste and the jurors are summoned, then they will have only a few things to look at to make a decision about that proposal. It's like a court. But the information they will have in this court is what the challenger and the challenged part are saying, and our covenant. So the covenant is the protection that we have, that we are like the most aligned point of our community, the thing that will hold us accountable for all the proposals we submit. It's also the document that if a proposal seems misaligned, that's where we're going to look at and be like, oh, I can challenge this proposal with confidence because it's misaligned with our covenant. So our job now is to make one. And it's good because we have the first steps that are the MVV. And we had a long process on refining the MVV. So we're in a really good start, but we just have to be very careful about the language. So there's one example here of Aragon, and they have it very, very much like a constitution. So they even say, oh, the ways we use must not, required, shall not, should not, recommend, may, and optional are interpreted as described. So they have a section here where they say how those words should be interpreted. They have what are the immutable guidelines. So this will never change according to this covenant. And this are rules that could change. And then that takes us to Ostrom's principles of having rules that we can all change, that we make ourselves, and that we all have the agency to do this, but that we have a process. And then when we see One Hive covenant is much more open, and there is not so many restrictions. There's a pledge, a code of conduct, and a little bit of like what is enforced on chain and off chain. I think somehow between the middle is a good approach for us, like something that it's not so dry, and that has a little bit of the warmth and the values that we have in the community, but also something that it's not so open that can harm our boundaries. So I wanted to pass around for a quick sense making on what you guys feel about these two covenants, and propose that we have a few working sessions to start framing them using a lot of the material we have in the Git book already. So I'll pass to you, Tim. For just so we have these two covenants that we're looking into, like using them as examples, but we also need to find our own direction for what's going to be the TC covenant. And if you have any thoughts on something that it's like strictly necessary that we should have, or
I haven't spent any time at all thinking about it, so I'm really caught off guard. I've looked at, I don't remember if it's Aragon or One Hive. I don't remember which one I looked at, but I thought it was extremely thorough. Probably what I would do is look at those for some sort of baseline and then see if there's anything specific to the TEC that would need to be added. But I wouldn't be able to say off the cuff like this. I'll pass to Durgadas.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know enough about this to weigh in on it. Thank you.
I can take it. I think like the covenant is, I feel it's very important it gets as most detailed as possible, because I don't know, like I had the luck to be a juror myself on One Hive, and you know, like it was very few information, and it was very hard to get a decision because of that. Like I feel like the more detailed it is, I feel the best. And I'll pass it to Juan.
Yeah, I was just reading both documents, and I find the one of Aragon like more complete than the one on One Hive. So I would go with this more as a reference, but we can read the other one to see what can we get from it. And here I just found again the same expression that Griff used once of Cambrian explosion. So yeah, it's nice to find that you learn concepts and then you can find them again, like doing research and learning. So yeah, that would be my take. I will pass to Chuy.
Sorry, I just came in, but from the context, I get that you're discussing like different community covenants that we can use as a reference. Uh, I uh, I personally just have experience with like the previous community covenant that One Hive used, and now the one after Celeste. So I'll give a read to the Aragon one, but I like from what I heard from Juan, like if Aragon's is like more complete, I would take I would definitely take that path for the TEC. I do think that we need something like more developed, not just like the values around. I think MVV covers that. So yeah, I would go for trying to cover as much as possible in our covenant. I'll pass it to Santi. I don't know if you want already.
Thank you, Chuy. I agree. The more information, the better. I prefer to have long documents with a summary that I can refer to and read every once in a while and go and check later on if I need to, than just something very short, which may transmit the idea behind the community, but sometimes it's not just the idea, the details that count and matter. And I agree that the more detailed document, the better from my perspective. I'll pass it back to you, Libby.
Can I propose something?
Sure.
I think like since we also have a legal working group, like the more detailed documents we're having are on legal, so I feel it would make sense like to do this work also coordinated with legal and software. I think that would be super cool.
Yeah, for sure. We'll sync there in legal. Does anybody else has something to add to this? Griff, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just really important that when writing the covenant that we remember the context, specifically disputing votes and conviction voting and disputable voting. That is the context for this covenant. So I agree with the details. We should really try to be specific about probably even writing, in my opinion, having sections for each of the two contexts that the document will be utilized in, and doing our best to brainstorm issues. And if really it's not like so incredibly important, we have to remember like all this is doing is saying whether or not a proposal can go to vote. It's not even saying if a vote is passable, right? Or the community still would have to agree to it. So if something gets through, or if something's rejected by Celeste, it can be reproposed with a tweak that fixes it. Or even if it gets rejected by Celeste, and then we as a community are like, well, that's stupid. It got rejected because our covenant has a gaping hole or has this line in it that really we shouldn't have anymore. That was a bad idea. Then we change the covenant, the person reproposes, and the proposal can go through. So it's not like the utmost, like we should definitely spend time on it and do the best that we can, but it's changeable later. And if we run into problems, we can adapt. It's not nearly as hard as like adding an amendment to the Constitution. It's more like just passing a disputable voting proposal, right? To change the covenant. So that's all. Back to you, Olivia.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. Okay. Yeah, that was mostly the sense making I had for us today. And then we have is there anything else somebody wants to propose for the agenda? Like, is there something people want to talk under Softgov before we move into Sourcecred?
Were there any other alternatives that we were considering outside of Celeste for this?
Yeah, that was in the proposal. The other alternative is that we would be the arbitrators ourselves. Maybe we would build like a gravity arm for it, or we would have to figure it out some type of process.
Do you see any inherent like vulnerability with relying on one hive or honey or any aspects of the protocol to accomplish this?
I think it would probably be more vulnerable if we did it ourselves. Like, I think adding unbiased points of contact to this process is healthy for the community. So it's not like, I mean, we've been in deep relationships, all of us, and the most we even if we try to be unbiased, I think that's really hard towards the groups and the relationships that we form inside. So if like certain person submitted a proposal and then someone challenges, and it is a bit more risky. It's not that it couldn't be done. And also, even with Celeste, if we see that it's not working, we could propose to remove them as the arbitrator. So it's not something set in stone. It's just an experiment, and he uses and something interesting Sam added to the proposal is that us using Celeste, it puts us like officially under the guidance template, and that every how do you say that, every development that one hive does, the TEC would be like eligible to use it as well. So we would be more like friendly connected in the tech development as well. Anyone has other thoughts about this?
I think in the worst case scenario where one hive court doesn't work, then we just get delayed. I mean, either nothing happens, or in the worst case scenario, things get stuck for some period of time until we can pass a until we can pass a voting proposal to change things. And yeah, I mean, if the court got corrupted, we could change the covenant in a way that, man, it'd be really, really tough. I mean, I guess there is, the worst case scenario would be that somehow the court got completely corrupted with people that hate us, and then we couldn't pass proposals. That would be pretty wild.
But
so
I think ideally that it cannot happen because the court is decentralized. Any one of us can be the jurors, let's say. So, and not only us, but like Livy was saying, like people who don't even know us can also be a juror.
Yeah, it would be really hard. I'm trying to think of like the worst case scenarios, and generally it's not like any money gets taken. It's just that things get slow, and we can always remove it from the application. I mean, if we really wanted to be extra careful, we could create a separate voting app that is not disputable, that has ownership over removing Celeste. So that way, like, Celeste couldn't block us from removing Celeste. That would be like an extra careful measure if we really didn't trust the protocol.
But then that could be an attack on its own. Like, if someone has
Well,
access to this contract that can remove Celeste and is doing it in a bad faith.
oh, not someone, but just a voting app that's not disputable. So like, because like if we just had the same voting parameters and all this voting app can do is remove Celeste and replace it with something else, that would mitigate any potential threat to Celeste doing any like locking our funds, basically. Like if Celeste totally got corrupted and just like somehow some troll hacked Celeste and then changed it so that he can vote, so that he's the juror for everything, and like some weird crazy like God, like he just made it the worst possible scenario ever. He could block us. This hacker could block us from uninstalling the app, because that itself would be a request into disputable voting, which could be disputed, right? It's a pretty crazy black swan event, but even that would just be mitigated by having a voting app that is only there just to mitigate that one crazy issue.
Wait, so jurors that are not like TEC token holders could dispute proposals?
Well, anyone can buy TEC tokens. There's a bonding curve. You can just buy them.
Yeah.
I don't know why anyone would want, this is called a griefing attack, right? I don't know why anyone would want to do that to us. Like, I don't know what the motive would be or why. It's very rare that those kind of attacks. But it could happen.
Okay, so maybe this is one solution for under this leave.
I have a question. Is Celeste audited or not?
I doubt it.
Yeah, that's.
I don't know. I mean, Aragon Network is audited. So the Aragon Court was audited, and then they made very few changes to it. But OneHive isn't really. They use good programming methodology, but they don't necessarily audit anything.
Okay. So can we move forward, or any other agenda topics to throw in here?
I guess I have one last question: is what would the cost be to us to build this on our own?
I think we would just have a multi-sig instead of Celeste. And that was the original plan when Celeste didn't exist. We would have a multi-sig, we'd throw the gravitons on it or something, or it wouldn't even be a multi-sig, it'd probably be a DAO. With gravitons on it, a multi-sig style DAO that, like in the case of a dispute, we'd have the exact same scenarios, but then they would act as Celeste and just make a decision.
Thanks for going over that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the big cost is like we don't have as great of a relationship with OneHive, and those people would have to do that work.
Okay, so yeah, I guess just a quick update on the data analysis that is happening. We had a call with WG and Jeff and Jess and Tamara yesterday. So we have one more week to the period that we had established before for them to go over the biggest amount of data they could. And there is a lot of directions being pointed already for proposals that we could look into. And they will use this last week to go over the categories that were set in a couple of sessions ago. So yeah, by the end of next week, we'll start looking into what we've got and craft a few proposals. And then from these proposals, we'll have debates on all of them and on different pairs and combinations of things that could happen. And then have a voting after everyone feels comfortable with the debates. So we're thinking of more or less 3 weeks period. So 1 week for them to finish, and then 1 week for us to build these proposals together and collective hack sessions, and then 1 more week for debates and a few more days to vote. So this would put us to hatch more or less. I don't know if there's other things holding the hatch, Tim.
No, this is the thing that we're making space for. I know that Griff can definitely give you an update on the process of the dress rehearsal with Common Swarm, which should be done before that. I would say maybe there's some comms work we still need to do, and getting people who haven't activated their impact hours to activate their impact hours. So yeah, there's additional comms work to do.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had a little bit more action on testing the dress rehearsal. That would have been cool. Not many people really participated or gave feedback. It's okay. We can run another one. You guys can make issues if you want to make it better. But it was seemed to work great. Lots of confetti. Everyone won. And I think they minted impact hours yesterday. And we'll be doing the vote for the commons upgrade, the test vote for the test commons upgrade on Thursday. Well, I think tonight, and then it'll still be active on Thursday. So during the call, we'll tell everyone to vote. And then it's just integrating the feedback that we have there, and we're done.
Sweet. Okay, so that sounds like everything is kind of in the same line, walking together. And the ideal scenario that I think it will happen, it would be that the hatch would happen like by the end of June, very beginning of July, end of June, hopefully.
Yeah,
And
I think the timing that we'll add in there is the Paris conference. Just make sure that it's still open during the Paris conference and maybe closes either the day after the Paris conference or maybe 2 or 3 days after. I think that's like the ideal dream. So
yeah, I was gonna say that would put us like to be mid-hatch during Paris.
Closer to the end.
It's gonna be on the 22nd ish. Okay, cool. So we're gonna start.
It actually, I think I have a bad lag. I'm really sorry, guys. Yeah, closer towards the end, it puts us maybe like 4 to 5 days, closing the hatch after the Paris conference, which would ideally be enough time for people to apply to Common Stack, have their membership approved, activate their scholarship, or apply for a scholarship, activate their trusted seed, and then convert their XDAI, and all of these little steps that have to happen before people can actually send funds to the hatch. So it's probably a nice little buffer.
well, we can coordinate for that to happen in the best way, right? To like launch on the, I don't know, 5th, and then we have 5 days more when being in Paris. We can probably look into that. Cool. So we're gonna start a hack session for Sourcecred now. If anyone wants to stay, you're welcome to stay, but it's gonna be hacking on the DAO params for setting up the Sourcecred instance that, like we had mentioned before, will coordinate the delivery of the Sourcecred rewards. And I think, Mateo, you can take us from here.
Yep, sure. How are you guys? Awesome. So, what do you think? Should we? I will share my screen and we go along through all that. I believe that Griff has a lot of experience on creating Aragon DAO. So, if you can guide me, man, if I'm doing something wrong, be free to tell me. Let me do it.